And we are preparing for the live stream. I will share the link as soon as it pops up. Boop, there it is. And hello, friends. Boom. Right on. So we'll give our friends just a couple minutes to show up. I see we already have a people here. Guys, if you're here, say hi and let me know that you are here. Close that down. Jay, hi Jay. Yay, I'm already excited. Who else is here? I see we are growing. Who is here? Hi, Sarah. Thanks for coming, guys. Who else? Who else do we have? I see you people. I see you. How's your evening going so far, friends? All the cool kids. Heck yeah. It's the only people that I invite to come here. Hi, Dennis. Oh, looks like it's time to make sure all of our things are off. All right, cool. So we already have friends here. Let me go ahead and introduce our guest. So welcome back, everybody, to the Social Hour. We're on a Monday this week, and I couldn't be happier to be off schedule because I'm really, really excited not only to interview today's guest, but to give you guys the chance to ask her questions. She is a multi-award winning photographer and self-portrait artist whose work has been published in so many magazines, it would take ages to tell you all about them. She explores the duality of human nature, delves deeply into her own psyche, and creates imagery that is both deeply expressive and ambiguous enough to allow the viewer to insert themselves into the narrative, giving them the freedom to ask questions and explore their own minds and hearts. Her work is filled with striking imagery and metaphor, combining the flexibility of digital editing with the sensibility and texture of analog art. She has been exhibiting her work widely for more than a decade, but she also shares her knowledge and experiences with students as a speaker and educator for platforms like CreativeLive, empowering students to dig deep and express themselves through visual art. Please join me in giving a very warm welcome to the lovely and talented Brooke Shaden. I'm going to hear.
Yay! I've been freed from the unmute button. Wonderful.
You have been allowed out of the dungeon. You are welcome. We have so many friends here today. Karen Gonzalez Casillas is here. Chris is here. Brett, Maureen, everybody, welcome so much, guys. If you have questions for Brooke as we go through this interview today, make sure you leave them in the comments. Brooke, you said your assistant is here to help us out today.
Yes. So if you guys have any questions or you need a resource for something, feel free to ask, and Laura will pop a link in the comments and she can help you out.
Yes. So that will be super awesome. So M. Roman says, hi, Brookie.
Oh, I'm so happy to see my friends here. This is so nice.
Yes. It's so wonderful. I love getting everybody together like this. It feels like a kind of a little reunion every single time.
Yeah.
Makes me happy.
Me
so,
too.
Lovely Miss Lady. I always like to start with just finding out a little bit about what propelled you into photography in the first place, and then we'll kind of delve into some other things. But what was the impetus to get all of this going?
Well, it was like 2 or 3 things converging at the same time, which I think when you find that thing that you love so much, it often is like a convergence of different life elements pushing you in a single direction. So for me, I was in film school, and I knew in like the deepest gut of my gut that I just didn't want to do it. I just knew, like, I just had this feeling like I'm in a career or about to be in a career where I don't feel comfortable and I don't feel like I can fully express myself. But I was just about to graduate, and I had just spent all this money on college, and I was like, well, I have to do it because I just spent the money on it, you know? And And then around that same time, when I was about to graduate, I was moving out to LA to pursue a career in filmmaking. And my friend called me, who I went to high school with, and she was like, we never get to see each other. We live in different states. Let's start doing self-portraits, and we'll just send each other the self-portrait that we do for the day. So we did that for like 2 weeks. We were just like making tons of stuff. And then she decided she just was done. She was like, okay, I've done the self-portrait thing now. Like, that's it. And I was like, that can't be it. I'm obsessed. And so I traveled across the country to LA from Pennsylvania and stopped in every state and did self-portraits and just loved it. And then a few months after that, decided that this has to be my career path. And I can't keep going in film. I'm way too antisocial for that.
So was it the antisocial element, or what was it about film that just made you know that this is not where I'm supposed to be?
It was a few things, really. It was yes, definitely the social aspect of it, which I didn't even fully appreciate until I got to LA and I started working on a couple of film sets. And it was like, I just dreaded it. I felt like I was always the one who didn't know what they were doing, and I wasn't comfortable asking. And I felt like I had to prove myself, especially working on these film sets where there would be like maybe one other woman. And I just felt so intimidated. And then it was also just not liking the technical stuff. And so there was like this discrepancy between, I want to be a DP, I wanted to be a director of photography, but then I had no real understanding of how to work a camera or how to work lights. And so I really just wanted to be the one to say, okay, no, put the light here and like try to make it look like this. And that's not really a job, unless
Right.
you are a director. So I felt like there wasn't really a place for what I wanted to do. But then when I found photography, it was like, oh my gosh, there is a place for that. It's just like me in my bedroom completely alone, and like I can do that here.
So there's nobody to perform for or look smart for, or
Yeah. It was a private, following your curiosity. And that felt amazing because I've always been very ashamed in my life of my intelligence and my ability to perform. And not anymore, don't worry. So like I'm super past that. But at the time, I always was the one who got really bad grades in school, but I tried so hard and I couldn't get into any of the colleges that I wanted to go to. And it kind of just caught up with me where I was always the one who just couldn't make it. And so being alone with my camera, it was like, well, it doesn't matter if I can't, because nobody needs to see it, until I want them to see it. And it felt really nice. And the funny thing about that is that I had that in my mind, like I can do this in private, but then almost immediately I started sharing my work online, and I had this flip of like, once I knew that it was safe, I didn't need it to be safe anymore. It was the weirdest thing, but really freeing.
yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I definitely want to dive into that in a minute. So you are doing self-portraits for a friend and you're finding that you love it. And is it that what you just said, that ability to kind of to freely chase what you're interested in without that fear of judgment that made it feel like such something worth chasing?
Part of it, but the other part was I am not a perfectionist at all. Like no part of me needs any of my art to be perfect. So working on a film set, it's like, even if you're not a perfectionist, somebody else will be, and it has to be perfect. And I just want to get things done. Like I have an idea. I want to do it. I want to move on to the next idea. Like I'm more interested in the ideas than the finished product. So I found it really freeing that I could create something and be finished with it and release it and then just move on. And you get to explore so much more quickly when you're working by yourself and it's under your, however you like to work. So that was really wonderful for me.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I definitely skirt some lines in there. I mean, partly like I have 8 million ideas that I want to make all the time. So it feels like I'm constantly being attacked by my ideas. But also I definitely I can't just be like, there, and there it is. I have to be like, nope, this isn't there and this isn't there, and move the thing. And people have watched me light sometimes when I have a picture in my head of what the light should look like in the scene. And I'm like dialing in and dialing and dialing. And they're like, can we be done now? I'm like, no, we're not there yet.
Yeah.
So it must have felt like, oh,
it did.
I can do what I want.
Yeah, because I had just been in film school for 3.5 years, and it was really hard for me because I watched all of these guys in my class, and we were like a little tight knit group. It was a pretty small school for what I went to school for. And the cool thing to do was we would all like hang out on campus, and we would bring a light meter with us, like everywhere we went. And we'd be like, okay, look at that leaf and how the sun is hitting it. What f-stop do you think it is? And like we would like guess and then take out our light meters. And I loved it because I felt like I was part of something, but I also was like, who cares? Like, I don't care about that leaf. Like, I just didn't care. So I always just felt like I'm just pretending so that I can like pretend to be a filmmaker, and it never felt real. And thus far has never been real. Like, I've never really done it because it just isn't quite the right medium for me. And people always say, well, you should go back to it. And it's not that I disagree. Maybe I will under my own terms, but it just still doesn't feel right. Like a decade later, it still doesn't feel like the thing I'm supposed to do.
Yeah, I can identify with that. Even with photography, I am certainly not a technical photographer. I mean, I can get into the technicalities of things I really like light itself. But
Yeah.
even then, I mean, I don't shoot with a light meter. I eyeball
Right.
almost everything. I'll be like, like a third, that should be fine. So
Yeah.
I definitely can empathize.
But you know, I feel like this is a really weird tangent, but this year I feel like I have had a closing of a chapter with this film stuff, because even before I went to film school, I always said, I'm going to make the most epic movie of Dune, the book Dune. And now this year it's done. And so now I'm like, well, I don't need to do it because it looks great. So now I'm like, forget it.
I
I'm not
did
going
see the
back.
trailer and feel like maybe finally it will have the movie it deserves.
I know, I've watched it so many times. We could talk about Dune for hours, trust me. But yeah, it looks
I
great.
did notice that that was your favorite book.
Yes.
So I can understand that. So was that what propelled you into film school in the first place? Feeling like there was something that needed to be made? And
Kind of. That was definitely like, if you had asked like 17-year-old me, why are you applying to film school? I would have been like, oh, ultimately I want to direct Dune, you know? But the reality of it was that I genuinely never found anything I was very good at in school. And then I finally found this videography class, and I was good at it. Like I won an award, and my teachers really liked what I was doing. And I just felt like if I finally found the one thing I'm going to be good at, then that's what I have to do, you know, not realizing that there might be other things that I could be good at. And, you know, but when you live in that bubble your whole life of like, you go to school, you get grades, that's how you're judged, then you think, well, that's your self-worth, right? Like, is how well you perform under those circumstances. And it wasn't really till I left there that I realized I could be good at other things under my terms and make up the rules myself. So that was, definitely an important lesson early on.
I love that. And I'm glad that you mentioned that, because that was one of the things I wanted to come back to that I wrote down that you said earlier. Was you said that you felt ashamed of your intelligence. So explain that to me a little bit, because I definitely want to dive into like what that looks like and how you overcome that to be so free in your own work at this point.
Yeah, well, it's really like I just said, where I was in school getting grades. They were bad. And like nobody believed me, because I was always the type of person who, like, I would go to school diligently. I never missed a class. I never missed a day of school. I went no matter what. I studied all the time. And now I know as an adult, like looking objectively, absolutely I have a learning disability. Like absolutely that was happening, but I didn't know that at the time. So for me, it was just like school was just like a cycle of shame where I'm trying so hard, harder than anyone else around me. I can't seem to pass my classes. I can't get good grades. I can't get into all the colleges that all my friends are going to. And eventually, when you fall into that pattern of people telling you you are bad at this, then you think you're bad at it. And you think, well, I don't have any other parameters to judge intelligence other than this, so I must be really stupid. And I ended up doing what most people do with their shame and turning it into a joke. And just, you know, I would be the first one to say, I'm stupid, I'm dumb, I'm an idiot, because it feels better to just get it out there, and then you don't have any expectations put on you to perform or to do something well. And I did come to realize, I wouldn't even say very early on into my photography, but at some point in the past like 12 years, I came to the conclusion that, one, I think I am a great artist. And that doesn't mean that I make amazing things. It just means that I make things that fulfill me to my own expectations. But also that, that intelligence is not defined in a singular way. And if I can be a leader in that realm and say, you know what, I might not be good at some things, but I'm amazing at other things, then that's got to give other people the confidence to say that about themselves. So for me, that flip in the narrative was partially to heal myself and partially to start healing others too, because I started to notice that everybody has that thing that they'll make fun of themselves for before anyone else does. And whatever that is, it deserves to be put down and to be flipped.
First, I can't tell you how much I love that. Second, it is certainly, I empathize with that in a backward way. So I was always really good in school, but I never had to try. I was just like, here, it's fine.
Yeah.
Like I would be the kid who didn't do their homework and showed up to the teacher and was like, can I use your computer really fast? Our printer broke or something. And then I'd be like, here's the assignment. And they're like, oh, great assignment, So it was terrible in a way that first it taught me that if I had to try hard at something, it wasn't something worth pursuing initially, because I had to be good at everything right away, or then there was something wrong with me, because I just always was.
Yes.
So if I had to work at something, it was like, oh no, I don't want to do that because I'm going to look dumb, and my value is my intelligence. And so if I don't have that, what do I have? Right. But then also I realized in school that people don't like you if you're smart and if you're not afraid to show that you're smart, and then they're mean to you because it is defeating, and so
it's intimidating.
Then it became like, okay, well, like obviously, like there's no win for me there, right? So I love Sarah. Oh, Nicole, I did not like people like you who didn't have to try. No, but I mean, I feel that because we're all dealing with something that's going on inside, right? Like those kids who had problems with me, it was not me that they had a problem with. And the people who were telling you things that were not true about yourself, it wasn't about you, right? It was about whatever was going on in here with them. And then we both have to come to the place at some point where we tackle that and we go, okay, this is not true, either objectively or subjectively, like in the realm of the world that I live in, which is constrained by my skull, like your brain doesn't get to come out. So whatever truth you make, that's the truth that you live. And so we have to come to some point where you recognize that that is not true about you and you get to decide. So how did you come to that point where you get to define the boundaries of your own reality?
For me, it was two instances. There was one point where I was on a stage and I said to the audience that I'm stupid. And when I said that, I was aware of it vaguely because I had done it a million times before on stages, but I didn't think it was bad. And then I got off stage and my friend Katrina Eisman yelled at me backstage. And she was like, you never, ever tell somebody that you're stupid, because that's what they'll believe. So you only tell people what you want them to think about you. And from that moment on, I get up on stages and I tell people how incredibly intelligent I am for all these different reasons, and not in a way that's like, look how great I am, but in a way that's like, let's all embrace the things that are good about ourselves. So that was a really big turning point for me. But I think that it started before that, this idea that power comes from how well you picture yourself for other people. So I started to realize that the more I went online and I shared my work and I complained and I talked negatively and I argued with people and I just brought this negativity to the table, the more people didn't trust me as a leader. What a thing to say during this week of elections. Anyway, so I started to realize that intuitively, that the more I sort of let go of that negativity that I had, and the more I brought positivity and positive self-talk, the more people looked at me as a leader. And I wanted that in my life. Like I felt like I have things to say that are important. How can I position myself so that people will listen, and I felt like that was it. And it really helped me get rid of that negative talk, but also embrace the positive.
That's outstanding. I mean, I no, I wrote that down for the people in the group. Power comes from how well you picture yourself for other people. Like that really is powerful. If we can think our way into that truth, like that makes a huge difference. What do you think it was about that kind of position of leadership that made it seem worthwhile for you? Because I know a lot of people, we kind of want the acknowledgement that comes along with our work, but also the idea of people looking up to us is kind of scary. So for you, what makes that a position that's worthwhile to have?
That's such an interesting question because I've never thought of it as a choice, actually. Like I didn't think of it as like, okay, I want to be famous. I want to be powerful, like things that people say to themselves when they go into a career. It was just really just like an overwhelming desire to be a teacher, I think, in all aspects of my life. Like from my earliest memories, I've wanted to be a teacher. And I always thought that I would be an English teacher. So for me, this idea of educating people is where it stems from. So for me, like going online, sharing my work, it's an opportunity to share wisdom and to share lessons that I've learned. And it's kind of funny because people ask me all the time, like people will say, well, I want to teach, or I want to, like be able to educate people or whatever, but I don't have a degree, or I don't know, like I'm not an expert in this. And I always tell people, you don't have to be an expert in something to lead people. You just have to be an expert in yourself, in understanding the lessons that you've been through and how to communicate that to people. So that's the only answer I got for that, because I think that it really just comes from that innate desire to teach.
That's another area where I feel that, because I sometimes I think I find my greatest worth in knowing that whatever I have done has helped somebody either become more of what they wanted to be or realize something they didn't realize before, which is a huge part of the reason that I find this show so valuable, because I feel like every week we get the chance to learn a little bit more and grow a little bit more by having people like yourself come on and talk about your experiences. So I love that. And I definitely feel that like deep in my soul. We have some more people joining us. Louise is here. Hi, Louise. Brian is here. Dennis is here. Dennis would like to know, who or what gives inspiration to Brooke's images? Does that well of inspiration dry up? And what does she do to recharge the batteries?
Yeah, it dries up sometimes. But here's the thing. So there are two kinds of ideas, and there's two kinds of inspiration. There's like the stuff that you can cultivate, and there's the stuff that's like divine muse inspiration. And they're two very different things. So sometimes my divine muse of inspiration does not come. But that's okay, because I have an eternal well of sort of inspiration that I've cultivated myself. And I think that there's a big difference between them. The difference is that the stuff that you've cultivated may not necessarily live up to your expectations, because it's stuff that you've done work on in the past. So it's not necessarily going to represent where you're going in the future. The divine inspiration comes from having done that work of understanding who you are and what your inspiration is, but then something clicks with something that you've just learned or something that is meaningful right now. And that's where I think the best work comes from, is when you've figured out, where does my inspiration come from? What is it? Who am I? Why do I create? But then something new happens to take all that inspiration and push it in a new direction. So for me, like inspiration tends to come from that really deep soul work of, okay, I've been through something. How does that feel? Why does it feel that way? How did I react to that situation? How can I translate this experience that I've had universally so that anybody in the world can understand what I experienced and they can see themselves in it? So for me, it's usually a personal thing that happens, or it's, just kind of a subject that I have a weird like fascination with, that I think we all have those kind of things. So like for me, it's death. I'm just obsessed with death. I think it's the best thing to study and to find inspiration from. I love it. So like for me, there's always like that weird thing that didn't necessarily happen to me. I'm not dead, but it's like, I love it anyway.
This would be a really strange interview if you were, though.
I know. I should have said that I was. I die in my dreams almost every night.
My questions would have gone into a whole different direction.
But what if I had said that and I was really serious? You would have had to been like, oh my God, what do I do now? Like,
no, I'd have been like,
dead.
let's explore that a little bit. In what ways are you dead? Please. let's get metaphysical here just for a minute. So first, with that idea of kind of finding, Sarah said, way too excited about death, girl.
Never.
Not at all. I actually really want to talk to you about that because death terrifies me. So I'm like, okay, let's talk about that. But before we do that, you mentioned, doing that deep soul work and kind of diving into those things and living in that space. And a lot of people would find that really scary, especially when we're talking about, things, deep heart, soul things that affect you. Do you find that scary? And how do you get yourself in a place where you can get in there and live in that space and actually make it work for you?
I find it so not scary that I find it the only way to deal with things that happen in your life. It's like a lot of people get analysis paralysis, but like not me. I am very much in the realm of like something has happened. I will feel that thing, I will experience it, but now let's step outside of it and look back and try to analyze everything, every part of it. So like, what happened? Why did I react the way that I did? Why did it make me feel that way? Do other people feel this way? How can I connect to the greater, emotional spectrum of the world by saying, how does my experience relate to other people's experiences? And I feel like I only am able to move past a situation once I've analyzed the situation. So I tend to start doing that while I'm in it. Like something, traumatizing will happen. And right then I'll start to be like, why am I reacting this way? What's happening? How can I understand this? So for me, it's the only way to deal with those things that happen. And I don't know why exactly I have that natural ability, but I liken it to, so when I was in school for filmmaking, I also got a degree in English literature, and I love just analyzing the crap out of books and stories and stuff. So I went into college with this, desire to have an English degree, and every day I would go to my classes and just like dissect the symbolism of this thing that somebody said, or like this plot in a book. And I found that the greatest way to understand myself and to understand what I've been through is to read it like a book and to say, what's the symbolism here? Like, what's the greater meaning of what's happening? And I think that when you connect that bigger meaning of your own life and how it relates to the world, then you start to heal from that. Because I think that, you relate to other people, you relate your experiences, and then suddenly you don't feel alone anymore because you recognize it's universal.
I really admire that you're able to do that. I definitely, in hindsight, I think it's something easier for me to do in hindsight. I think I feel everything so hard that my initial instinct is like, nope, put it in a box. Like, put it away. Don't want to feel that. I took kind of Scarlett O'Hara's mantra, and I'm like, I'll think about that tomorrow. I just like don't have the mental, spiritual, emotional bandwidth to deal with that.
So you know how in like in a relationship, there are two types of people who have relationships. There are the people who like you get in a fight and you're like, I'm walking away. I don't want to talk about this. Like we're done. Then there are the people who are like, we need to talk this through right now because I can't sleep until it's all talked through. I'm like totally that person. I'm like, I cannot walk away from a situation until it's like been processed through my brain. And once it's processed, then I can let it go. And if not, I'm like dead to the world. I can't function. So for me, it's a necessity.
I will do that with my people. Like if I have interpersonal issues, those can't live because I value myself based on how other people think about me. And if you don't like me, it destroys me inside. So if Nicole, I have an issue,
we have so much in common.
I have an issue. Like if my husband and I have an issue, I'm like, okay, let's fix. I am the diplomat of everything. I want to bring everybody together and fix it. It's going to be okay. Let's talk about it. We're going to make it copacetic. If it's my own problem, I'm like, oh no. And then I've realized my writing. So like the books that I write, that tends to be how I explore my issues. I will put my characters through hell and make them experience things so that I can feel that through with them and walk through those steps. But it's definitely more difficult for me to do that introspection work earlier on in myself. Although I'm working on it, I'm getting better at it, but I really admire the fact that you're able to be like, okay, what's triggering this? Why does it feel that way? And then do you think, you mentioned not feeling so alone. Do you think that urge to then kind of create a thing out of that is that a desire for connection or to be like, me too, guys, us together?
It's it's two-part, I think, because part of it is, yes, I want to add my voice to the world and to be able to make something that perhaps those who don't know how to express the things that they've experienced or their emotions that way, they can latch onto that and say, oh, this is a visual representation of how I feel, which makes me feel great that people can do that with my images. But then, yeah, the other part of it is that I am a wildly antisocial person, and I don't have a lot of friends, and I don't talk to people ever. So my way of communicating to the world is through my images and what I say online. And like, that's my social life. And there is nothing outside of that, it's just that. So for me, it's also like, if I'm my friends, my closest friends always say, if I want to know how you're feeling, I just go online, because I'm not going to tell them. I'm not going to tell anybody. I'm just going to tell the internet, which is really bizarre.
I'm not going to tell anybody. I'm just going to tell everybody.
Exactly. But that's totally how I operate.
That's so funny, because if you had not said it, having this conversation with you, I never would have guessed it. I would have been like, look, such an adroit person, so friendly, so bubbly. I never would have been like, that's an introvert right there for sure.
I'm the most introvert, but I also, huge tangent now, I also love being in control. So if I love putting myself in situations where I am in control of the situation, then I'm fine. But if I'm not, then I'm out.
I feel you. That's where most of my anxiety comes from. That's like anything. That's why I can't go on a cruise, because I don't trust anybody. Like, if I can't see the shore where I can jump out and swim to the shore, then I can't. Nope. I'm not
well, that leads us to the natural debate then of who's in control right now. I mean, is it you or me? Because we both think we're in control here, but no, I defer to you. You're in control.
Which is why we're both so comfortable, right?
I like it.
Oh, that's such a meta thing to talk about. Like, I love the fact that we're at that point in this conversation.
It's perfect.
So yeah. So, okay. One of the things that I did want to get back to, Becca's here. Hi, Becca. Debbie Hansen. Hi. Reflection, Exploration of Self, the limited edition
Debbie.
by Brooke Shaden. Is it really coming out in 2020?
Yeah, it got postponed. I'm so sorry, guys. It's the traditional COVID situation. Yeah, 2021. I'm sorry. I have no control over it.
It's going to be here, though. That's the important part.
Yes,
right?
Eventually. Yes. I'm still also waiting to hold it in my hand. It's held up at the printer. Sorry.
Oh, that's the worst when you can get the copy. It's like the best ever thing.
Yes, I can't wait.
As my fingers go like this. I don't know why this is what you do when you need to feel a thing. So I wrote down also, you mentioned earlier, self-talk. So obviously that's something that comes into play with a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about, from how you view yourself to how you deal with your thoughts. And I know you mentioned, obviously what a wonderful friend to say, don't you dare say that about yourself.
Yeah.
But how do you handle your self-talk, and how do you teach yourself to speak differently about yourself in your own head?
I think the only thing you can really do is just recognize it when you're doing it, because usually we don't. Usually, and that's because we put these horrible labels on the way that we speak about ourselves, like we're joking, but it's not really joking because it becomes ingrained in us. And I think that's the biggest problem, is recognizing that what you're saying about yourself does not have to match your reality. And often it does. Like, if I say to somebody, I'm stupid, that is an unintelligent thing to say. You know what I mean? So like, I'm making that happen for myself, and I'm perpetuating it, and I'm falling into those same stereotypes where I fail at things because I'm constantly focusing on being a dumb person. But when you change what you're saying, you start to become more of that thing. And that's what I have found to be true. So I first just acknowledge it. What are the things that I'm saying about myself that are not necessarily true or could be changed, the way that I say it. And it changes too. Like, it's not like I've only ever thought that I'm stupid. Now I'm not. Everything's great. Like, new things come up all the time, and they always will. So it's not like you can just say, well, I'm always positive about who I am. No, you'll find new things to hate yourself about. You always will.
Because humans are so good at that.
Yes, we're so good at it. We're so good at it, and it changes week to week. Like this week, I have an infant in my house right now because I'm a foster mother. And I just today, I was like, God, I'm such a bad mother. I said it out out loud. And it's like, wait, I know at least that I need to stop saying that, you know? And so like changing, well, no, I'm saying, I just don't know what I'm doing right now. And that's okay. You know? So it's like, you always find new things, but recognizing it is how you change it.
Yeah, agree. And even once you recognize it, it becomes something that you have to do constantly. You have to continue to remind yourself every single time. It's not like just, oh yeah, that's there, and it doesn't happen anymore. It's like, no, every time it pops up, you have to go, no, I don't say that about myself. That's not who I am.
And you know, it's like there's also a difference between lying to yourself and changing the narrative. I think it's also important to say that, because I am not one of those people who's very like woo-woo. Like I don't do the mantras and stuff. Like I'm not really into that stuff too much. So I'm never going to be the one to say, well, just say that you're smart and then you'll be smart. No, like say I have learning to do and then do the learning, you know, like it's about doing the work after the fact as well. And I think that's a big part in changing the narrative, because it's easy for someone to go to a yoga class and then for them to be like, okay, repeat after me. I am smart. I am beautiful. Like I've been in a class like that and I'm like, what is this person talking about? And it's not that I think that there isn't a lot of value in that, because I actually really do think that there is value in that, but it's so much more productive to do that work within, to say, okay, I am smart, but how can I make myself smarter? How can I actually like create actionable steps to really believe that and to move in that direction? And I think that's so important.
Yeah, I agree. Because once you start talking about yourself differently, you start thinking about yourself differently. Yeah. And when you say certain things about yourself, you begin behaving that way. So what do smart people do? Well, they learn, right? Mm-hmm. Or they speak, they do whatever. And you find yourself kind of naturally falling into doing those things. But you have to keep up the work of telling yourself that, which seems to be the trickiest part. Especially when you don't believe yourself at first. It takes a little while to convince yourself.
And that's why those actionable steps are so important, because it's easy to not believe yourself. And that's why when you're in that yoga class and you're chanting, I am beautiful, you can be like, this is a hoax because I have no reason to believe that, you know? Right. But if you instead say, I'm going to do, 3 things this week that make me feel beautiful, then you're doing actionable things and it helps to change your mind.
Yeah, agree. I am definitely all about, if I feel most in control when I can do something positive toward whatever it is that is giving me issues, whether it's anxiety issues or like I experienced, I'm a Washingtonian. We don't have severe weather. And I was living in North Carolina and there were tornadoes and I was not having it. I had the very first ever fight or flight experience of my life where I was going to bundle my kids into the car and drive until I got to the ocean, because for some reason in my head, tornadoes don't happen at the ocean.
Yeah.
Totally do. But I thought like, I'll just drive until tornadoes can't happen anymore. So I had to go and learn everything I could learn about tornadoes and find out how people actually die from them and what you can do to actually protect yourself from them. Hint, it's mostly head injuries. So if you have a helmet, you're like 3/4 of the way there. So
I love that you just said that. And it's so funny because I always have a fight response to these things. And it drives my husband crazy because we'll hear like a noise in the house at night. My first reaction is always get up and run toward the noise. And he's always like, no, please don't run toward the noise. It always makes us laugh so hard.
I'm a self-protector. Like I will protect me and the people that I love. But for some, like you don't get to fight a tornado. You know what I mean? Like that's like the finger of God just going you and you and you. And for me, I was like, no, I'm taking the babies and I'm going to run. Imagine I would tornado helmet. Boop. I told my husband if we lived in another state where they really had tornadoes, I was going to have one of those tornado shelters in the garage. Like they bolted into your thing. Like I'm not going to live that life. But yes, the whole point being the more active I can be towards fixing a thing, if I have something I can do, then it just makes everything better. It alleviates the anxiety and gives me a place to go. And so 100%. So going off of this space, kind of talking about, who we are and how we decide who we are, before we get into how that informs the art that you make, moving in that direction, your favorite memory, it says, flying into the sky before she lost her wings at the age of 5. What does it mean, Brooke?
She was so I'm talking not to you anymore, Nicole.
Right.
But Nicole was like, I'm gonna ask you a really random question and it's just gonna come at you, and this is it. So okay. When I was really little, I had this dream that I flew, but I was like convinced that it really happened. And I in my mind, I went outside, I was playing, and I just started flying. And then I ran inside and I was like, Mom, I flew. And her version of the story is, no, you woke up from your bed and you came downstairs and you told me that you flew. And I'm like, no. So at the time, though, instead of saying, oh, that was just a dream, she said, well, everybody flies once in their life and this was your turn. And we like made it a big thing. And so it was really cute. And so I always would tell people, like, I already had my time. Like I flew when I was 5 years old. And then everyone else would be like, okay, like, what is she talking about? But I believed it for like a really long time. I was an extremely gullible child and adult, actually. So so I believed it for a really long time. And then finally we had this talk of like, it was just a dream. And I still, though, like part of me is still like, maybe not, though. I don't know.
Yeah, but maybe not. Oh my goodness. I feel so there's so many random things that I'm learning that we have in common. I my kindergarten teacher wrote to my mom, Nicole has a hard time distinguishing between fantasy and reality. And like that is the mantra of my life, because it's 100% true, which is why I make the kind of work that I make.
Totally.
I 100% like I live in the fantasy world of my own head. And there's something really beautiful. I'm so glad that your mom decided to approach it in that way, because it gave you something beautiful, didn't it?
It totally did. And she's done that many times. I mean, she was really good at like turning these moments really special. Like there was one time when one of my favorite memories is we were driving just randomly out for errands when I was little. I was probably like 7 or 8 or something. And we saw a hot air balloon and my mom was like, look, look, look. So we were all looking and I think I said something like, I wonder where it's going to land. And she was like, let's find out. And for an hour, we just like drove on these back roads trying to chase the hot air balloon, and it's like, we would always make time to do stuff like that. It was really nice.
I love that. Do you think, so having flown at the age of 5 and then having a mom who obviously encouraged that in you, how much do you think that plays into your desire to create? I mean, all of us creatives in general, there's something that pushes us to make. And that's always something that fascinates me. But then of course, some of us make, portraits that are very indicative of real life, and others of us go, nope. And do you think that played into the direction that you take your self-expression?
Sometimes I do, but I'm not really convinced of it, because though my mom is a wonderful mother, I didn't feel like I grew up super creative. Like we never did crafts. We never painted. It wasn't like a big thing in my house.
Sure.
My sister ended up doing a lot of art. My dad is a musician. And so there's art in my family, but I always actually felt like I was the one that was bad at it. And so I kind of grew up with the opposite feeling, like how good for some of my family to be very creative, but I'm not that, and then I also wasn't like book smart, and I also wasn't athletic. And so I was like, but what am I then if I'm not going to be those things? So for me, it wasn't so much an example or even an anti-example of like, I'm going to go in the opposite direction of my family. It was really more so recognizing my weirdness and then coming to terms with the fact that this is the thing that sets me apart from other people, and then deciding to, for lack of a better word, capitalize on that.
Yes. Capitalize on your weirdness.
Why not?
100%.
And I mean that like, spiritually, monetarily, like whatever. But yeah, I'm working on t-shirts. So maybe I'll put that one in.
Do that. Capitalize on your weirdness, because I am 100% in for that.
I love it.
So much. Especially growing up as the weird kid, as the one who does the impressions and gets trotted out to do funny things for the family. Like, boy, I want to live in that life.
Yeah.
So looking at like becoming creative and then doing that introspective work and looking at how things affect you and how you think about them, what does the process look like of taking that and then turning it into a visual? Like, you've experienced a thing. How do you translate that visually?
Yeah, it's there are obviously a lot of avenues for that, but not for me. There's only really one avenue for me. I always want to make that distinction because I don't want anyone to ever think like this is how you do it. But for me, it comes back to what I talked about with literature and being absolutely obsessed with analyzing books and recognizing that every good book communicates the heart of the story through symbolism and wanting to do the same thing. So my ideas come from perhaps a personal place and sometimes not, like sometimes just a topic that I'm really interested in for whatever reason, but there's always a way to communicate something universally to people who don't speak your language or haven't had the exact same experiences, and that's symbolism. So that's what I always focus on. I always focus my attention on, okay, so here's a thing that I want to communicate. How can people understand that visually? And a good example of that is that in August, I did a charity print sale for kids in foster care. And I made this image where I made my body look like a tree. And the symbolism of it was, you know, perhaps read differently by different people, and that's good. But, you know, the idea of a human being being a tree, being the roots and the pillar and the branches and the leaves and stuff like that, it will have different meaning to different people, certainly. But that's the beauty of symbolism, is that you read it however you need to read it at that moment. And that's why the best literature, you know, sticks around for hundreds of years, because that symbolism connects to people even still.
Sure. I love that. Do you think, so as symbolism starts to change, do you think that that kind of open or pseudo ambiguous quality is what lends itself to multiple interpretations? And is that something that you aim for? Because I know I definitely visually, I often have something very specific that I want to create. And so I will hit people over the head with it rather than be like, maybe it's this. Is that something that you aim for?
I do, yeah. I've never been interested in communicating very specific stories through my photography. And I think that like there are two types of artists. There are people who create with a very specific story and a very specific visual because there is a very specific message that needs to be communicated. And then there are people who do just the opposite, which I definitely fall into that camp of saying, here's an experience I have had, but now let me like see how can I let go of that experience so that I understand it's just one of many similar experiences in the world. And I'm more interested in collectively what are all of those experiences and how do we communicate that rather than how do I communicate me? Because I just don't find that very interesting personally, to be like, this is my story and this is what I felt. I want to know how you feel when you look at this story that I've made. So I don't know if that makes much sense, but it's
Totally
definitely
does.
like a reverse process for sure.
Yeah, no, it makes complete sense. And I certainly, that's something that I have been aiming towards more in my work, because I do feel like often it's fairly heavy-handed, but it usually is because I have a picture in my head and I just need to make that picture. And it rarely comes from a place of like, which I wish it did more, but it rarely comes from a place of the self-exploration and more from a place of this is what makes me happy.
Yeah.
And so it's like, oh, look, fairies, and they're very pretty.
I like
You
that
know,
too, though.
something like that, which I enjoy because it's that's my safe space is magic is real, and that's my safe space.
Mhm.
So, you know, that is something that I make. However, I have found that the things that do affect my viewers more are the things that are a little bit more ambiguous, that are a little bit that let you ask questions and try to figure things out. So
But you know what? I think that it's a double-edged sword because depending on what you do first, people will always want to see what comes next. So like if
Mm.
you're used to making things that are really specific, the moment you do something different, people are interested. And I found that with me this year in particular, like the more I make something really specific to my situation, people want to talk about it more. I'm like, no, maybe I just need to flip-flop. You never know what's going to come. It might be ambiguous, it might be very specific, who knows.
Yes. Just always keep them guessing. That's how you keep them interested. Friends who are here, we have just about 10 more minutes left with Brooke. It's so sad. If you guys have any questions, please get them in now so that we can make sure that we give her a chance to answer those before we go. And as we do, I always end with this question, so I'm sure we'll have a few questions pop up. And if there are kind of more interesting things to explore, we will go in that direction. But just in case, my final question is always, what's your why? Why to make out of everything you could do as a living or a job or a life? Why make?
Because I want to inspire people to live their story and to communicate their story. So to me, the best way you can live your life is by example. And the more I create and the more I encourage, the more people will see that I've been able to do it so they can do it. So I'm very obsessed with the idea of legacy and the idea of letting your actions, be the thing that gets left behind rather than your words or your art, because I think that in the end, that's not really all that interesting. I mean, everyone's got words and art to just spew and spew and spew because anybody can do that. But it's the way that you made people not only feel, but the way you made people take action. And I think that's the best legacy to leave, is to say, I want to impact you. I want to move you. I want to make you feel something, but I want you to do something ultimately so that you can inspire other people to do that as well. So that's why I create, because I feel like if I don't, then, that's one less way that I can inspire action in others.
Why? It's a very kind of altruistic thing to want to do. What motivates you to desire that for other people?
I think people are much healthier in their relationships, in their relationship with their self, in everything that they do when they are able to create and they're able to express. And I think that's really where most of the world's issues sort of fall into this category of, I don't know how to properly express what I'm feeling, so I'm going to negatively impact you, and then you're going to negatively impact somebody else. And the more we can give these tools for self-expression, the more we can heal and the more we can be really productive and positive members of society. And I don't know, honestly, I don't know where compassion comes from. Like, I don't know why I care. I don't know why some people care and other people don't care, but I just really care about that. And so I want to make sure that everything that I put out there is thoughtful and pushes people in a positive direction so that they can do that for others. And I mean, like, imagine a world of all these artists where like we all have the tools to express what we need to express. And there are people there to receive that. And there are people who will, like do their own thing with that you've put out there. That's so amazing to me. Like, I think about a world filled with artists, which I don't even have to think much about it because I live in it. Like, my whole world is this community online, so and I see the good that does and the way people heal. And it's just like, there's no better feeling than that. And that's where teaching comes from too. Like, it's not fun to just tell people information, at least not for me. It's fun to watch that information inspire action in somebody.
That answer just makes me like you even more. So just going to tell you that right now. So Brett would like me to mention the Underwater Podcast. The Underwater Podcast. Brett Stanley. It's interviewing rad people doing underwater stuff. Go check that out.
Awesome.
So M. Roman would like to know.
Hi, Marilyn.
Marilyn. Hi, Marilyn. Knowing how you are obsessed with death, do you not fear death? Does it not make you sad?
It makes me incredibly sad, and I'm terrified of it. And that's why I'm obsessed with it, because I think that we have a really unhealthy separation from death, and specifically in my American society, but in a lot of different societies. And that separation from death is, I think, why so many people do fear it so much and do find it so sad. And if you are interested in reading any books about this, there's an amazing author and YouTuber named Caitlin Doughty, and she has these incredible books. There's one called From Here to Eternity. There's another one that my friend just got me, called Will My Cat Eat My Eyeballs? And other questions about what happens when you die. And it's like, she's really great. So I recommend reading this book From Here to Eternity, which is like a super tiny read. And it just talks about all these different death rituals in other cultures, and the way that, pretty much every culture throughout history has found death to be sad in some capacity. Depending on your beliefs in the afterlife, depending on your comfort level with the dead, it might change your perception. And so she kind of goes into all these different cultures that see death as a celebration or see death as normal. Like she talks about a culture where it's normal to live with dead bodies in your house for years at a time. And that's just like kids grow up like talking to like great grandpa who's like dead in a chair for 2 years, and they think that's normal. And I started reading about this, and I felt like after having a couple of experiences with like coming to terms with what death will mean for people close to me as well as for myself, I started to think about how if I could only get closer to it, then maybe I won't be so terrified of it anymore, because it's been a very overarching fear in my life from a very young age. So I decided I just have to research it. I have to get closer. I have to learn about it, and I have to normalize the conversation around it, because if I can be a catalyst for normalizing that conversation, then again, maybe more people will become more comfortable and it won't be such a terrifying prospect.
Yeah. Having the same fear and having been there with my father as he passed, I will say, although it didn't for me remove the kind of existential fear around what happens after.
Yeah.
It certainly did give me a sense of peace and closure, and being able to be like, okay, he's really gone now, because it's much, much different than not being able to see somebody as they pass. So certainly I will say that for me did really make a big difference in the physical aspect of it. The existential part, the spiritual part, all of that stuff, still very uncomfortable. But with that uncomfortability, I do, since we're kind of so nearing the end, I'm really upset we didn't talk about anti-fragility. Let's go over that just really fast, because I feel like it is so important.
Yes. Okay. So we were talking before we went live about this idea of anti-fragile. And if you don't know about it, I highly recommend you do some reading. There's a book by Taleb called Anti-Fragile. It's the fourth book in a series of 5. I don't recommend you read all of them. It's a little dry, but just look up the idea of anti-fragile. And it's this idea that there are 3 types of people. There are people who are fragile, where something bad happens and you're crushed by whatever it is that happened. And then there's like the more normal middle ground of people, where something bad happens and it hurts and it might derail you, but eventually you get back on the train and you keep going. And there's the idea of anti-fragile, which is this idea that something bad happens to you, but you take that thing, and even though you're affected by it, you decide to turn that thing into something beautiful or something productive, and you move forward with it as inspiration rather than something that's negative in your life. And I'm obsessed with this idea of anti-fragility and practicing that in my life. And I think that I've always had this natural inclination toward anti-fragility, which I think a lot of people would label as optimism. But I think that that's a little bit of a misnomer, because we use the word optimism as like, look on the bright side, but anti-fragility isn't look on the bright side. It's actually look on the dark side and figure out how you can get that dark thing to help you in your life. And I think that if more people can just attempt to practice that, then we can start to do a myriad of different things that are so helpful. Analyze our deepest selves, analyze our trauma, and then figure out how to make those things that are so hurtful work for us in the future.
That is such a powerful thing. And I've noticed we certainly, especially right now, have a kickback toward this idea of optimism. And like we see these people who are optimistic, and so many people are attacking that. They're like, don't minimize, what's going on. And it's like, look, it's not a minimization. It's going, this is a real thing, but it doesn't have to be the thing that kills me. I can take this and make it something new.
Yeah, it's very much like, I feel like in so many ways for so many people, the year of 2020 has been the year of the anti-fragile test, which is like, we see a horrible thing happen. Now, what's the action that we're going to take because of that to move forward? And that's anti-fragility. And I think that it's just been beautifully on display this year by, different things like the Black Lives Matter movement, for example, taking something horrible and then saying, now let's use this as our fuel to make sure something better happens. And it happens on a personal level with the pandemic, where people are saying, okay, something bad has happened, but now how can I use that to benefit me, to make something good come about in my life? And this happens in so many different ways for so many different people. It's not a single path. It's just an idea that something bad has happened, and you can feel that bad thing and you can be crushed by it, but then look at it objectively and say, now, what am I going to do moving forward?
Yeah. And in some strange ways, it makes you wonder, what is darkness in the first place? I mean, when you look at it, if you're able to take that and force it to work for you in some way, then what is it really? I mean, what is it but a servant of the light, ultimately? Like if you are able to make it help you somehow or help somebody else somehow. I know that that's often how parents of, unfortunately, deceased children from all kinds of ways, where they find a way to make that, to serve them, to, I just lost the word that I was going to use, but to make some meaning out of that, and to make their life having been worthwhile in order to force that to serve something, other children or families, or preventative, or reminding people to become close to their loved ones, or whatever it is. I mean,
yeah. And this might be perhaps the weirdest analogy that I will ever say, but thinking we're going to loop all the way back to the beginning when we talked about Dune. And so I'm rereading Dune right now, because as I do every couple of years, and there's this whole storyline. If you don't know Dune, too bad, I'm going to tell you. There's this whole storyline about prescience and seeing the future, and how if you can see everything that's going to happen, then your life isn't worth living. And it's kind of how I think about darkness, is like we have these pockets of darkness in our life, and they tend to be bad things that happen to us that catch us off guard. If they didn't catch us off guard, then they tend to be easier to swallow, because you prepare for it and you know it's coming. But when you don't know, it's this moment where you're surrounded by darkness, you didn't see it coming, something has made you feel like you are alone, or you are, sort of shrouded in darkness. But at the end of the day, it's those moments that you couldn't foresee that end up building your character and building these stepping stones that make life worth living. And I do think that if we didn't have those moments of darkness, then the light wouldn't mean anything at all. And I think that's what Dune is about. So everybody read Dune.
So now go read Dune. It is your job now, people, friends. If you haven't read it, now you shall,
Yes.
Because Brooke said so. And so we must. Yeah, I 100% agree with that. And as a writer, that's absolutely why I'm a cruel God.
Yes.
Writers must be, especially fiction writers, must be cruel gods. And you have to ask yourself often, like, what kind of a person am I that I would do that to these characters? Because I want the best for my characters.
Oh my gosh,
and
yes.
They're not going to grow past what the issues that they have, or the other things that happened in their life before I got to them, because they have histories
Yeah.
before I took over their world. So yeah, I mean, it's such a weird place to be, to recognize that as part of humanity, and then to be like, of life in general, and then to be like, yeah, I'm going to do that to my characters.
But you know, it's interesting. So I'm working on my first novel right now, and it's so much fun to like think about this, how we write these horrible experiences in for them, because we know, first of all, that that's what people want to read, because it's interesting to read about darkness. So what if we could take those parts of our own life and turn ourselves into a character and recognize that this is what makes an interesting person? And at the end of your life, I want to look back and say I was interesting, if nothing else, that at least I had an interesting life. So you might as well embrace those moments, you know. And you know, if you must stab someone through the heart at the end of your book, then you must, you know, and that's how it ends. But it's interesting, and people will get a lot out of it. So
if you must stab them, you must.
You must
kill all the darlings, which is what makes Emma funny, because she never has any issues and she's kind of a shithead because of it, right? And then eventually she has some issues and somebody finally tells her and she's like, oh, bye, I need to be a better person. That's just how it goes. So
I need to answer this question that Andy asked.
Please.
I say only read as far as book 4. That's my Dune recommendation.
That's where it ends. Now we know.
You know, you can go till 6, but it's a little. Go till 4. 3 at the least.
We do think Frank was being bullied at that point, right? Like, write more books. People want them. And he's like, but the story's done.
I know. Let's just skip thousands of years into the future and see what happens. No, nobody ever likes that.
No.
Anyway.
Leave the writers alone. Okay, friends, we've already gone a little bit over time. I know there were some questions that we didn't get to, and I'm sorry. Some of that is my fault when I get really excited about conversations and I just forget to ask the questions. I hope you won't hold it against me. I hope you will be here next week on Tuesday for my interview with Jan Gonzalez. He will be here. He is amazing. And after that, Becca Bjorky will be here. So I hope you guys will be here for that. It looks like we had an amazing group of people here with us today. I would go by and name everybody, but there are so many of you guys today. Thank you so much for being here. We do have to mention really quick, Brooke has a class out on CreativeLive called Creating a Fine Art Series. So make sure that you go and check that out. I will have all of the links to Brooke's Instagram and her website and the CreativeLive class, and all of those goodies will be in the description. So you guys can head there, show her the loves, follow her on all the things. Go check out the class if that is the kind of thing you are inclined to do. Brooke, you are lovely. Thank you so much.
You are too. I'm so glad to have one new friend.
Yes. Yay. Yay for new friends. That was super fun, guys. I hope you will be here. And we will say goodbye to you